Close your eyes. The past is about to speak. When you think of an Ottoman palace, your mind might drift to a world of jewel-toned silks and sun-drenched marble courtyards. You might imagine the Sultan, a figure of immense power, reclining on plush cushions, listening to whispered poetry as servants offer him delicate sweets from silver trays. It is a vision of serene, almost silent, luxury and whispered intrigue. But behind the perfumed gardens and quiet halls of state, there was another world, a sprawling, roaring, and relentlessly demanding engine that made it all possible. This was the palace kitchen, and it was less a place of culinary art and more a chaotic, industrial-scale food factory. Forget the delicate politics of the Imperial Council. You probably wouldn't last a single day in the smoky, high-stakes inferno of the palace kitchens. It's a side of history we rarely see, but tonight, we will walk its greasy, well-trodden floors. Let the past sing you to sleep. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Drop a note in the comments below, and it's always a pleasure to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cold. It is a deep, damp cold that seems to seep into your bones, a chill carried on the salty breath of the nearby sea. It is the hour before dawn, a time when the world is painted in shades of charcoal and deep indigo. The city around you is a slumbering giant, but you are already awake, your footsteps joining a soft, shuffling rhythm on the ancient stones of the street. You, along with a few dozen other souls, are moving towards the source of all power in the empire, the Topkapi Palace. It looms against the faintly lightening sky, not as a fairy tale castle, but as a formidable, sprawling silhouette, a dark fortress guarding the peninsula where two seas meet. Your clothes are simple, a coarse tunic and trousers, and your shoes are worn leather, thin enough that you can feel the unevenness of every single cobblestone beneath your feet. The only light comes from a few sputtering torches held by guards, their flames dancing in the breeze, casting long, wavering shadows that make the familiar look strange and the strange look menacing. The dominant sound is the hushed tread of feet, a collective sigh of tired bodies moving toward a long day's work. In the distance, the first call to prayer begins to echo across the sleeping rooftops, a haunting and beautiful sound that marks the true beginning of the day. You arrive at the threshold, the great Imperial Gate. It is a monumental structure, more fortress than entrance, and the guards standing before it are as still and silent as statues. Their faces are lost in the shadow beneath their helmets, but you can feel their eyes on you, a silent assessment of your purpose. There is no friendly greeting, no nod of acknowledgement. You are simply one more cog in the immense machine that serves the palace. A low groan of wood and metal announces the opening of a smaller door set within the massive gate, and you are ushered through. The moment you step inside, the air changes. You are now in the first courtyard, a vast, sloping expanse of land dotted with plane trees. At this early hour, it is mostly empty, which only serves to amplify its scale. It feels less like a palace and more like a military encampment, a functional and austere space designed for processions and armies. Later today, this very ground will be teeming with thousands of people, Janissaries in their distinctive uniforms, officials, petitioners, and merchants. Historians note this was the most public part of the palace, a bustling hub connecting the Sultan to his city. But now, in the pre-dawn quiet, its emptiness is a weight. You feel small here, utterly anonymous. Your guide, a grim-faced steward who met your small group at the gate, gestures for you to keep moving. He doesn't speak, merely points with his chin. As you walk, your eyes are drawn to a small, octagonal structure near the gate. It's a fountain, but its nickname sends another chill through you, one that has nothing to do with the morning air. It is the executioner's fountain. This is where, by custom, the state executioner would wash his hands and his sword after carrying out a sentence. The severed heads of disgraced officials or criminals were sometimes displayed in the niches flanking the gate you just entered, a stark and constant reminder of the price of failure. There's no welcome basket here, no friendly orientation. Your first sight upon entering your new place of work is a monument to swift and brutal justice. You feel a knot of anxiety tighten in your stomach. It's the universal feeling of being the new person, of starting a job where the rules are unknown and the stakes feel impossibly high. You are just one among hundreds, perhaps over 1,000, who will work today to feed the palace. The sheer number is a point of academic debate, fluctuating with feasts and festivals. But the reality for you is the same. You are a tiny, replaceable part of a colossal operation. You walk past the old Byzantine church of Hagia Irene, which stands stoically within the courtyard, a remnant of a fallen empire now enclosed within the heart of a new one. Despite the fear, despite the intimidating scale of it all, you keep putting one foot in front of the other. You are here for a reason, for the security of a position, however humble, for the promise of a daily meal, and for a place within the gravitational pull of the most powerful household in the world. As you follow your silent guide towards a secondary gate, leaving the great open court behind, you catch the first real scent of your destination. It's not the spices or roasting meats you might have imagined. It is the smell of smoke. Wood smoke, thick and pervasive, curling from a dozen unseen chimneys. It's the smell of industry, of fires being stoked for a long day of relentless work. You are heading toward the palace kitchens, and the day has just begun. You follow the steward through the gate of salutation and into the second courtyard. The atmosphere here is entirely different. It is still a space of immense proportions, but it feels more like the administrative heart of the palace. Cypress trees and rose bushes line a formal path leading toward the Imperial Council Hall and the entrance to the inner sanctum. But your guide turns you immediately to the right, leading you down the entire length of the courtyard, and it is here that your destination truly reveals itself. What you thought was just a long, low building is, in fact, a sprawling complex, an architectural beast all its own. This is the Matbeletter 131 Amir, the Imperial Kitchens. From the outside, it doesn't look like a place where food is made. It looks like a factory. A series of 10 enormous, domed buildings are connected, flanked by a forest of at least 20 tall, conical chimneys that are already beginning to breathe gray smoke into the morning sky. The sheer scale is difficult to process. You've seen neighborhood bakeries and cookshops, But this is something else entirely. It's a structure built to feed a small city, which is precisely its purpose. You later learn that these kitchens, which replaced an earlier version destroyed by fire, were designed by the master architect Sinan, the most celebrated builder of the age. But he did not design them for beauty. He designed them for brutal efficiency and, perhaps most importantly, fire containment. As you draw closer, the low hum you heard from a distance resolves into a symphony of industry. It's a complex sound, layered and growing louder with every step. There is the rhythmic sound of countless knives on wooden blocks, a steady, percussive beat from dozens of unseen hands. There is the deeper, resonant sound of heavy pots and pans being moved across stone floors. And underneath it all, a rising murmur of voices, not conversation, but the short, clipped calls of people at work. The air, thick with smoke, is now gaining a new texture. It carries the sharp, almost eye-watering scent of hundreds of pounds of onions being chopped, the earthy smell of unwashed root vegetables, and the faint, sweet perfume of yeast from the bakery section. Your guide leads you into the complex through a wide, arched doorway. You step from the cool morning air into a world of steam and shadow. The change is immediate and disorienting. The air inside is warm, humid, and heavy, with the combined breath of hundreds of people. The light from the high, grated windows is dim, struggling to pierce the hazy atmosphere. You find yourself in a long, cavernous hall, the first of many. The ceiling, a high stone dome, is already blackened with the soot of generations. The space is a labyrinth. Doorways lead off in every direction, and you see endless processions of boys and men moving with a purpose you do not share, carrying sacks of flour, trays of dough, and glistening carcasses of sheep. This is not one single kitchen. It is a series of highly specialized, interconnected workshops. Your guide, still silent, propels you through this maze, and you catch glimpses into different worlds. Through one doorway, you see the bakery, where men covered in a fine white dust are kneading dough in troughs the size of small boats. The heat from their ovens washes over you in a wave. Through another, you see a room dedicated to dairy, with massive churns and clay pots filled with milk and yogurt. Another chamber is clearly for the butchers. You see them working swiftly, their aprons already stained, breaking down whole animals with an efficiency that is both impressive and unsettling. There are kitchens specifically for the janissaries, the powerful infantry corps of the Sultan. There are kitchens for the officials of the Imperial Council, for the residents of the harem, for the palace school, and even a small, separate kitchen for the Sultan himself, a place you cannot even see. You feel a profound sense of being lost. There's no map on the wall, no helpful signs indicating confectionery this way. Your modern sensibility screams for an orientation meeting, a laminated floor plan, a buddy system. Here, the only way to learn is to be thrown into the chaos and hope you learn to swim. Historians believe that on an average day, these kitchens would employ over 1,000 people to prepare food for at least 4,000 residents. During major religious festivals or celebrations, like a prince's circumcision feast, that number could swell to over 15,000 people. The logistics are staggering, and as you are marched through the heart of it, you feel less like a new employee and more like a single grain of rice about to be tossed into a very, very large pot. The floor beneath your feet is slick with a mixture of water, grease, and spilled food. You have to watch your step constantly to avoid slipping or stumbling into someone carrying a heavy load. The noise is constant, a dull roar of work that seems to absorb all other sounds. You try to catch someone's eye, perhaps to offer a small, nervous smile, but no one meets your gaze. They are all focused on their tasks, and their movements are economical and practiced. They are part of a system, a human machine that has been running for centuries. The specific functions of some of the smaller rooms and annexes are still debated by scholars, who rely on cryptic clues from palace accounting ledgers and procurement lists to guess at their purpose. For you, it is simply more proof that you are in a world with a dense and unspoken history, one you are expected to understand without being told. Finally, your guide stops before one more doorway. The air coming from this one is different. It is intensely sweet. It smells of honey, toasted nuts, and something floral like rosewater. It is a stark contrast to the savory, smoky smells of the main kitchens. The guide gives you a slight push, the first physical contact he has made. It's not rough, but it is firm and final. His duty is done. He turns and disappears back into the steam and chaos, leaving you standing on the threshold of your new life. You have been delivered to your station. You take a tentative step forward into the overwhelming sweetness and the unknown challenges of the Halva House. The great, roaring engine of the palace kitchens is at your back, and a new, specialized world of meticulous craft awaits. You stand at the entrance to the Halva House, a place that feels distinct from the brawny chaos of the main kitchens. The air is still warm, but it's a dry, sugary heat, not the damp, steamy atmosphere of the stew kitchens. The sounds are different, too. The percussive chopping is replaced by a more rhythmic, almost gentle sound. The steady pounding of pistachios and almonds in huge stone mortars, the soft scrape of wooden paddles against copper pots, and the low, controlled hiss of simmering sugar syrups. This is a place of precision, a laboratory of sweetness. Yet, as you step inside, the first thing you notice is the hierarchy, an invisible structure as rigid and real as the stone walls around you. At the top of this small world is the master of the Halva House. He stands near the center of the room, a man of middle age with flour dusting his eyebrows and a look of intense concentration on his face. He is not physically imposing, but he carries an aura of absolute authority. He watches everything, his eyes darting from a pot of bubbling honey to the work of a young apprentice rolling out a thin sheet of pastry. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. A slight frown or a sharp, flicking gesture of his hand is enough to send a ripple of anxiety through the room. His position, you realize, is not just about skill, it's about trust. The sweets made here are not just for dessert. They are instruments of statecraft, served to foreign ambassadors, sent as gifts to loyal governors, and used to mark every important occasion in the life of the dynasty. Poisoning was a constant, gnawing fear in the palace, and the men who handled the sugar were as vetted as the men who handled the Sultan's own food. Beneath him are the senior confectioners, the foremen of this sweet factory. They are men who have worked their way up, their hands and arms marked with the pale scars of old sugar burns. They move with an unhurried confidence, tasting syrups with the tip of a finger, testing the consistency of a paste, their every action born from decades of repetition. They are the keepers of the recipes, knowledge passed down not in written books but through demonstration and guarded instruction. You see one of them showing a younger cook how to pull hot sugar into shimmering, silk-like threads, a process that looks both magical and incredibly painful. Then there are the cooks, the rank-and-file workers. They are organized by specialty. Some only make marzipan, their fingers nimble as they mold sweetened almond paste into impossibly detailed shapes of fruits and flowers. Others are focused on the dozens of varieties of halva, stirring the thick, heavy mixtures in wide copper pans over low heat, a task that requires immense stamina. Still others are responsible for jams and preserves, carefully tending to bubbling cauldrons of quince, apricot, and sour cherry, filling the air with a fruity, tangy perfume. And at the very bottom of this pyramid is you, and the other new arrivals. You are an apprentice, a scullery boy, a scullion in the old tongue. Your title is unimportant, your function is simple. You are here to do the work no one else wants to do. You are to fetch, to carry, to clean, to pound, to stir until your arms ache, and above all, to watch and to learn in silence. Your first task is assigned with a simple, sharp gesture from one of the senior cooks. He points to a mountain of pistachios in the corner, and then to a large, heavy mortar and pestle. No words are exchanged. The instruction is clear. You are to grind them into a fine powder. You find a spot on the floor, out of the main traffic flow, and begin your work. The stone pestle is heavy, and the work is monotonous. You lift and drop, the rhythmic thudding becoming a part of the room's soundscape. Around you, the life of the kitchen continues, a complex dance you are not yet a part of. You see a boy, no older than 12, rushing past with a heavy tray of baklava, its layers glistening with syrup. He stumbles, and for a heart-stopping moment, the tray tilts dangerously. The master cook's head snaps up, and a terrifying silence falls over the entire room. The boy manages to right the tray, not a single piece lost. A collective, inaudible sigh of relief passes through the kitchen. The master cook gives a short, sharp nod and the work resumes. The entire incident lasts less than 5 seconds, but it's a potent lesson. A single mistake, a dropped tray, a burnt pot of syrup, an improperly measured ingredient, is not just an error. It is a failure that is noticed by everyone, a disruption to the sacred order of the kitchen. There's no concept of a learning curve here, no gentle onboarding process. You either sink or swim. Historians often debate the exact nature of the training system within the palace guilds, but it's largely agreed that it was a harsh and effective form of apprenticeship based on observation and tireless repetition. Failure could mean a beating, demotion to an even worse job in the outer kitchens, or outright dismissal from the palace, a disgrace that would follow you for life. This relentless pressure forged an environment of extreme competence, but also, you suspect, of quiet desperation. You wouldn't dare ask a senior cook a question. That would be an admission of not paying attention. You just watch, and you try to replicate. As your shoulders begin to burn from the repetitive motion of grinding, you feel a flicker of resentment. This isn't cooking. This is manual labor. But then you look at the face of the master cook as he inspects a finished piece of marzipan, turning it over in his hand. You see a flicker of pride in his eyes, the satisfaction of a master craftsman. You realize that even here, at the bottom, you are connected to that. Your mountain of ground pistachios will become part of something beautiful and important. It will be transformed into a delicacy destined for the highest tables in the land. The hierarchy is unforgiving, but it is also what makes the entire operation possible. It is the skeleton that supports the flesh of this incredible culinary machine, ensuring that from 1,000 small, thankless tasks, something worthy of an emperor can be created. You lower the pestle again. The thudding sound a little less like a chore and a little more like the first, tentative beat of your own contribution. Hours have passed, marked only by the shifting light from the high windows and the growing ache in your shoulders and back. The mountain of pistachios has been reduced to a fine, fragrant green powder, and your hands are stained with its oil. You have been moved from that task to another, and then another. You have washed enormous copper pots, their surfaces so hot they almost sizzled at the touch of cold water. You have hauled sacks of sugar that felt as heavy as stone. You have pitted what felt like 1,000 sour cherries. Your fingertips stained a deep, incriminating red. Through it all, you have been a ghost, moving on the periphery of the real work, your labor essential but invisible. Now you have been sent on an errand, a brief escape from the sweet-scented confines of the Halva House. A steward, a different one this time, a harried man with a ledger tucked into his belt, has tasked you with helping to unload a new delivery. You follow a line of other low-ranking apprentices and laborers out of the kitchen complex and back into the second courtyard. The sun is higher now, and the courtyard is the bustling hub you glimpsed earlier. It is a controlled chaos of janissaries drilling in formation, their uniform movements a stark contrast to the scattered scurrying of petitioners and scribes. The air is filled with a low murmur of 100 different conversations and the clink of military equipment. Your destination is a section of the courtyard near the kitchens, where a train of supply carts is gathered. And here, you witness the true, staggering scale of the palace's appetite. It is not just a few carts. It is a river of raw ingredients, a daily deluge that feeds the insatiable hunger of the imperial household. The logistics are mind-boggling. There are carts groaning under the weight of freshly slaughtered sheep and cattle, their carcasses shrouded in cloth. There are wagons piled high with wicker baskets of squawking chickens and ducks, the sound adding to the general din. You see a cart dedicated entirely to eggs, thousands of them nestled in straw. Another is laden with fish from the nearby sea, packed in ice and seaweed, their silver scales glinting in the sun. Then comes the produce. It is a tidal wave of color and texture. There are mountains of onions, pyramids of cabbages, and endless sacks of root vegetables, turnips, carrots, and radishes, all still covered in the dark. Rich soil they were pulled from this morning. There are delicate herbs, carefully bundled, parsley, dill, and mint, their combined fragrance cutting through the heavier smells of the courtyard. In the summer months, this river would swell with peaches from Bursa, melons from Manassa, and figs from the Aegean coast. The empire's finest produce flowed to this single point. There's no modern supply chain manager with a spreadsheet here, just a powerful network of purveyors and stewards, a system built on relationships, contracts, and the implicit threat of failing to provide the best for the Sultan. Your job is to help unload sacks of rice. Each one is incredibly heavy, and you struggle to hoist it onto your shoulder, your muscles straining. You join a human chain, a line of men and boys ferrying the provisions from the carts into the vast storerooms that flank the kitchens. As you trudge back and forth, you catch sight of the more exotic goods. There are barrels of olives and wheels of cheese from the Greek islands. There are sacks emanating a powerful, intoxicating aroma, spices, peppercorns from India, cinnamon from Ceylon, cloves from the Malaccas. These are not mere flavorings. They are symbols of the empire's reach and wealth, more valuable than gold by weight. A steward with a ledger meticulously checks off each item, his pen scratching on the page, accounting for every single peppercorn. Historians use these very procurement lists, the Matba Emini Defterlery, to reconstruct the palace diet, revealing a culinary world of incredible breadth and sophistication. You feel a sense of wonder mixed with your exhaustion. You are touching the bounty of an entire empire. The lamb you carry might have been raised on the plains of Thrace, the rice you haul grown in the fields of Egypt. It is a tangible connection to the vast territories under the Sultan's rule. But there is also a shocking amount of waste, and to your modern eyes, a certain lack of sentimentality. The live animals are penned nearby, awaiting their turn with the butchers. The sheer volume of it all means that some produce will inevitably spoil in the heat. It is a system of overwhelming abundance, a deliberate display of power. The palace did not just need to eat, it needed to be seen to have more than it could possibly consume. You also witness a small but telling interaction. A cart driver argues with a steward, gesturing heatedly at a crate of pomegranates. A few of them are split, their ruby-like seeds exposed. The steward is unmoved. He shakes his head, makes a note in his ledger, and waves the driver away. The palace standard is absolute. Imperfect goods are rejected. This isn't a farmer's market where a bruised apple is sold at a discount. It is a transaction with the highest authority in the land, and only perfection is acceptable. A quirky but documented fact is that certain purveyors had exclusive, hereditary rights to supply the palace with specific goods, like the yogurt makers from one particular village, whose secret techniques were a state secret. As you heave another sack of rice onto the growing pile inside the storeroom, the air cool and smelling of dust and dried grains, you understand a fundamental truth about this place. The art of the chefs, the skill of the confectioners, it all rests on this foundation. The relentless, overwhelming, and ruthlessly managed procurement of the finest ingredients on earth. The kitchen's power begins not at the hearth, but here in the courtyard, with the arrival of these carts. You are just a beast of burden in this part of the process, but as you wipe the sweat from your brow and head back for another load, you realize you are part of the first and most crucial act in a daily drama of imperial consumption. The river of food flows on, and you are one of the many hands guiding its course. After the back-breaking labor of unloading provisions, you are sent back to the Halva House. The air, once just sweet, now feels cloying, the sugary perfume sticking to the back of your throat. Your brief time in the fresh air of the courtyard has made the transition back inside even more jarring. The work has not paused for a moment in your absence. The rhythmic pounding, the stirring, the quiet intensity are all just as you left them. You are immediately put back to work, this time on a task that requires a bit more finesse than hauling sacks or washing pots. You are to shell almonds. A mountain of them awaits. You sit on a low stool, a shallow bowl in your lap, and begin the painstaking process of cracking each shell and extracting the nut whole without breaking it. It's tedious work, but it places you in a corner where you can observe the inner workings of the Halva House more closely. You are no longer a beast of burden, but a fly on the wall, and you begin to appreciate the artistry you are surrounded by. You watch one of the senior confectioners making gules, a traditional dessert especially popular during Ramadan. He takes paper-thin sheets of starch-based pastry, so delicate they are almost transparent, and bathes them in sweetened, rose-water-scented milk. He layers them with crushed walnuts and pomegranate seeds, his movements fluid and precise. It is a dish of ethereal lightness, and he assembles it with the focus of a jeweler setting a precious stone. This is your first deep dive into the political and social significance of sweets. In the Ottoman court, they were far more than a simple end to a meal. Sugar was power. When a new sultan ascended the throne, or when a great military victory was won, huge quantities of sweets, especially baklava, were distributed to the janissaries. This baklava procession was a crucial political ritual. If the janissaries accepted the sweets, it signaled their loyalty and contentment. If they refused, it was a sign of grave displeasure, a silent threat that could foreshadow a revolt. The sweets you are helping to prepare are, in their own way, as important as the decrees issued by the Imperial Council. Historians still argue about the exact origins of some of these complex desserts, with debates over whether baklava's layered pastry technique has its roots in Central Asian nomadic traditions, Byzantine kitchens, or somewhere else entirely. But here, in this kitchen, there is no debate. There is only tradition, a set of rules and recipes passed down through generations, considered the pinnacle of the art. You notice that the master cook tastes everything, not with a spoon, but by dabbing a small amount on the back of his hand. It's a gesture of both intimacy and control. Your fingers are growing sore from the almonds, the repetitive pressure of cracking the shells. It's a small, nagging pain, a reminder of your lowly status. There are no ergonomic tools, no comfortable seating. There is only the task and the expectation that it will be completed. You glance at the other apprentices, their faces set in masks of concentration. They, too, are performing these endless, preparatory tasks. They are the human food processors of their day, turning raw ingredients into the building blocks of masterpieces. This is the unglamorous reality behind the romantic image of the palace kitchen. For every master chef composing a dish, there are 20 boys like you, shelling nuts, pitting fruit, and grinding spices into dust. As you work, a small drama unfolds. A younger boy, tasked with stirring a pot of simmering jam, lets his attention wander for a moment. The master cook, whose eyes miss nothing, sees the jam bubble just a little too furiously at the edge of the pot. A dark spot, no bigger than a coin, begins to form at the bottom. The master cook doesn't shout. He walks over, takes the large wooden paddle from the boy's hand, and with a swift, expert motion, scrapes the bottom of the pot. He lifts the paddle, smells the slight acrid scent of burnt sugar, and his face hardens. He says nothing to the boy. Instead, he calls over one of the senior cooks. He shows him the paddle. The senior cook's face falls. He speaks to the boy in a low, sharp tone. The boy's eyes fill with tears. He is not beaten, not here in the middle of the kitchen, but his punishment is perhaps worse. He is stripped of his task. The senior cook gestures for him to take your place shelling almonds. Then he points at you and then at the jam pot. You have been promoted. You quickly wash your hands and take the paddle. Your heart is pounding. This is your first real cooking task, and you've only gotten it because of someone else's failure. The jam pot is heavy, the mixture thick and bubbling like lava. Stirring it requires your full attention and a surprising amount of strength. The paddle is long and unwieldy. You have to keep the mixture moving constantly, ensuring no part of it catches and burns on the hot copper. You can feel the master cook's eyes on you. You can feel the shame radiating from the boy who is now doing your old job. It's a brutal lesson in accountability. There are no second chances when it comes to a pot of jam that might be served to the mother of the Sultan. You focus on the rhythm of stirring, the circular motion that keeps the sweet, fruity mixture circulating. You are terrified of failing, of feeling that dreaded scrape of burnt sugar at the bottom of the pot. But as the minutes pass and the jam continues to simmer perfectly under your care, a new feeling begins to emerge alongside the fear, a small, flickering flame of pride. You are no longer just shelling nuts. You are cooking. In the Halva House, the sweet factory of an empire, you have taken your first, tentative step up the unforgiving ladder. Your time at the jam pot ends without incident. The senior cook eventually takes over, finishing the preserve with an expert's touch, adding a squeeze of lemon juice at the perfect moment to prevent the sugar from crystallizing. You are relegated back to simpler tasks, but with a subtle change in status. You are no longer the newest, most untried apprentice. You are the boy who was trusted with the jam. It's a small distinction, but in this hierarchical world, it's a meaningful one. You spend the next hour meticulously cleaning the sticky residue from 100 tiny confectionery molds. During a lull in the intense activity, you are sent on another errand. This time, it's not to the bustling courtyard but deeper into the kitchen complex itself. You are to deliver a small, covered tray to the Cushing, the Sultan's private kitchen. This is a task of immense trust. The tray contains a selection of freshly made almond cookies, still warm from the oven, intended for the Sultan's personal tasting. The steward who gives you the tray looks you directly in the eye, his expression grim. Go straight there. Do not stop. Do not speak to anyone. Do not lift this cover. The unspoken threat hangs heavy in the air. As you walk, clutching the tray with both hands, You move through the familiar chaos of the main kitchens, but your path takes you to a more secluded, guarded area. The noise begins to fade, the air clears of the thickest smoke, and the number of people dwindles. You pass by guards who watch you with a focused suspicion you haven't encountered before. These are not the ordinary palace guards. These are the Sultan's personal attendants, and their only job is to ensure the security of his person, and by extension, his food. You arrive at a doorway that looks no different from any other, but it is flanked by two of these stern-faced guards. This is the entrance to the Cushing. It is a world apart. While the main kitchens, the Matbeletter 131 Amir, are a massive food factory designed for volume, the Cushing is a culinary laboratory designed for perfection and security. Only a small, elite team of cooks works here, men who have been selected for their supreme skill, loyalty, and impeccable backgrounds. Many of them were trained in the palace school system from boyhood, their entire lives interwoven with service to the Sultan. You are not allowed to enter. You hand the tray to one of the guards, who takes it without a word. The door opens briefly as he passes it to someone inside, and in that fleeting moment, you catch a glimpse of the world within. It is startlingly different from the soot-blackened, cavernous kitchens you have come to know. The walls are lined with pristine blue and white tiles. The copper pots and pans hanging from racks gleam as if they were made of gold, polished to a mirror shine. The light is better, the air is clearer, and the atmosphere is one of hushed, reverent silence. It's less like a kitchen and more like a temple, or perhaps an operating theater. The paranoia surrounding the Sultan's food is palpable. Every ingredient that enters the Cushing is subjected to intense scrutiny. The head taster, a high-ranking and trusted official, would sample every single dish before it was served to the ruler. This was not a ceremonial role. It was a life-or-death responsibility. He was the first line of defense against poison, a constant fear that haunted rulers throughout history. But the security went even further. We know from palace records that certain ingredients were sourced from specific, trusted farms, their supply chains guarded. The water used for the Sultan's cooking and drinking came from a particular fountain, its purity checked daily. Scholars describe a fascinating ritual of service. Once the meal was prepared, the dishes were placed in special containers and sealed with a strip of paper or cloth bearing the stamp of the head cook of the Cushing. These sealed containers were then carried in a solemn procession to the Sultan's private chambers. Any break in the seal would be a cause for alarm, and the entire meal would be discarded. This elaborate system, known as the tasting ritual, was designed to create an unbroken chain of custody from the fire to the Sultan's fork. As you stand outside the door, waiting for the empty tray to be returned, you think about the pressure on the men inside. In the main kitchens, a mistake might lead to a spoiled dish or a demotion. In the Cushing, a mistake could be interpreted as incompetence, or worse, treason. A simple stomach ache for the Sultan could lead to a full-blown investigation, with interrogations and potentially fatal consequences for the entire kitchen staff. The irony is thick enough to taste. The most powerful man in the world, who could command armies and topple kingdoms, lived in constant fear of a single, poisoned grape. The door opens again, and the guard hands you back the empty tray and the now uncovered lid. He gives you a curt nod, a dismissal. As you turn to leave, you can't help but feel the immense gulf between your world and theirs. You are part of an army of cooks feeding a population. They are a handful of artisans feeding one man. Yet their work is the pinnacle of the entire culinary operation, the ultimate reason for the existence of the sprawling kitchens. Your almond cookies, made with your own hands indirectly at least, have passed through this portal. They have been judged worthy to be presented to the inner sanctum. You walk back through the noisy, smoky main kitchens, the gleaming, silent image of the cushion burned into your mind. The contrast highlights the rigid stratification of this society in miniature. It's a world of insiders and outsiders, of general rations and elite delicacies. Your brief journey has shown you the very peak of the mountain you stand at the bottom of. It feels impossibly distant, a world you can never hope to reach. But for a fleeting moment, you were a link in the chain that led directly to the Sultan. It's a strange and sobering thought as you return to the anonymous, clamorous heart of the palace kitchens. Returning to the Halva House from the rarefied air of the Sultan's private kitchen is like waking from a strange dream. The familiar smells of sugar and spice envelop you once more, grounding you in your reality. The hierarchy, the rules, the endless tasks, they all snap back into focus. Your brief moment of importance is over, and you are once again at the bottom, tasked with transferring a thick apricot paste from a large cooling tray into dozens of small earthenware pots. It is sticky, monotonous work. As you methodically fill each pot, you are now close to another specialized corner of the sweet-making world. This section is not focused on pastries or candies, but on liquids. It is the domain of the sherbet and spice masters. Here, a different kind of alchemy is practiced. An older cook with a long, thin beard and deeply stained fingers presides over a collection of flasks, jars, and vials that looks more like an apothecary's bench than a kitchen station. He is a master of drinks, jams, and medicinal pastes, a guardian of secret recipes that are considered as valuable as any state secret. You watch him work out of the corner of your eye. He is preparing sherbet, but not the frozen confection you might think of today. Ottoman sherbet was a refreshing, non-alcoholic drink, the ancestor of the modern cordial or syrup. It was made by boiling fruits, flowers, or spices with sugar and water to create a concentrated syrup, which would then be diluted with cool water or even snow brought down from the mountains. The variety was astonishing. There were sherbets of rose, tamarind, pomegranate, lemon, and violet. Each had its own distinct flavor and was believed to have certain properties. Some were for cooling the body, others for aiding digestion. The master works with the intense precision of a scientist. He measures out spices on a small, delicate scale. He adds a single, precious drop of rose oil to a large vat of syrup, and the fragrance instantly blossoms in the air, a pure, intoxicating perfume. You see him tasting constantly, not for sweetness, but for the balance of complex flavors. These drinks were a cornerstone of palace hospitality. A guest of any importance would immediately be offered a glass of sherbet, the specific flavor chosen to honor them. It was a subtle art, a form of liquid communication. Beside the sherbets, he also oversees the creation of jams, jellies, and a fascinating confection known as akide shekeri, or rock candy. But more intriguing are the medicinal pastes. He grinds herbs and spices with honey to create electuaries, thick, potent concoctions meant to cure ailments or act as tonics. One of these was Messir Makunu, a famous paste supposedly containing over 40 different spices and herbs. Legend says it cured the ailing mother of a great sultan, and its recipe is still a closely guarded secret in some parts of the world today. Seeing it being made here, you realize the line between food and medicine was incredibly thin. The palace kitchen was also the palace pharmacy, and the head physician would work closely with these masters to create remedies for the imperial family. This specialization is a testament to the sophistication of the culinary culture. There wasn't just a cook. There were halva makers, sherbet masters, pilaf makers, and yogurt makers, each with a specific and deep knowledge of their craft. This division of labor allowed for an incredible level of refinement. There's no modern equivalent to this. Imagine a restaurant with a chef whose only job for 30 years has been to perfect the taste of the lemonade. The quirky historical tidbit here is that the spice masters were often involved in perfumery and incense making as well, their knowledge of aromatics being highly valued throughout the palace, from the kitchens to the harem. You finish your task with the apricot paste, your fingers sticky and sweet. Your next job is to grind spices. You are given a handful of cinnamon sticks and a small, heavy mortar. As you begin to pound the tough bark into a fine powder, the warm, woody aroma fills the space around you. It's a scent you've known your whole life, but here, it feels different. It's a key ingredient in the machinery of power and pleasure that surrounds you. You are, in a very real sense, grinding up money. These spices, having traveled thousands of miles over land and sea, are now being turned into dust by the lowest-ranking boy in the kitchen. The irony is not lost on you. So before this great story continues, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're enjoying our journey together. Your support means the world. The work is slow and your arm quickly begins to ache. The cinnamon bark is tough and fibrous, resistant to your efforts. A senior cook, noticing your slow progress, comes over. He doesn't scold you. Instead, he takes the pestle and with a series of quick, sharp strikes demonstrates a more efficient technique, using the weight of the pestle and a slight twisting motion to break down the bark more effectively. He hands it back to you without a word. It's another small, silent lesson. You are learning the physical language of the kitchen, the muscle memory required for even the simplest tasks. This silent instruction is a form of human resilience. In a world with no formal training manuals or HR departments, knowledge was passed through gestures, through observation, through the subtle correction of a shared task. It was a system that fostered a deep, unspoken bond between the masters and the apprentices who were worthy of their attention. It was inefficient by modern standards, but it ensured the preservation of complex traditions in a world without widespread literacy. As you continue to grind the cinnamon, now with a bit more skill, you reflect on the world of flavors being orchestrated around you. The sherbet master is now tasting a deep purple syrup, his eyes closed in concentration. He is not just tasting fruit and sugar, he is tasting a tradition, a symbol of hospitality, a potential cure for a fever. You are a tiny part of his world today, your powdered cinnamon destined for a pastry, or perhaps a spiced drink. You are slowly, painstakingly, becoming part of the palace's complex and flavorful ecosystem. Your brief, relatively delicate sojourn in the world of sweets and spices comes to an abrupt end. A steward appears at the doorway of the Halva House, his eyes scanning the apprentices. He points at you and two other boys. You, come. The command is sharp, leaving no room for question. You quickly wipe your hands on your apron and follow him out, leaving the cloying sweetness behind for the second time. This time, you are not heading towards the courtyard or the Sultan's private kitchen. You are being led into the very heart of the beast, into the main kitchens where the heavy lifting is done. The transition is a sensory assault. You are plunged back into the thick, smoky, and humid air, a fog of steam and savory smells. The noise level rises tenfold, a chaotic symphony of metal on metal, shouting voices, and the bubbling roar of massive cooking vessels. The steward leads you into one of the largest domed halls, a space dedicated to cooking stews, soups, and grain dishes in bulk. And it is here that you come face to face with the great cauldrons. They are monstrous. Calling them pots feels inadequate. These are enormous, two-handled copper cauldrons, some so large they could easily hold a whole person, or, as was often the case, a whole ox. They are set into thick brick and stone hearths, with roaring fires blazing beneath them. The heat radiating from these cooking stations is immense. Even standing 10 feet away, you feel it on your face and arms, a dry, oppressive wave that makes you sweat instantly. The men working here are stripped to the waist, their bodies glistening with sweat, their muscles straining as they stir the contents of the cauldrons with paddles the size of boat oars. This is the engine room of the palace kitchen. The food prepared here is not for the Sultan or the high-ranking officials. This is the food for the thousands of janissaries, the palace staff, the pages in training, and everyone else who lived and worked within the palace walls. The sheer quantity is what defines this space. You see a cauldron bubbling with a thick lamb stew, another with a simple porridge of cracked wheat, and a third filled with a simmering lentil soup that will feed hundreds. Your task is deceptively simple. The stew in one of the cauldrons is ready. It needs to be decanted into smaller, more manageable pots to be distributed. There is no tap, no spigot. The cauldron must be tilted. You and the other two boys are positioned on one side, while 3 strong, experienced cooks man the other. Your job is to help lift and control one of the massive handles. You grip the handle. It's thick and hot, even through the rag you've been given to protect your hands. On a signal from the head cook, you all lift and pull. The cauldron, filled with hundreds of pounds of stew and metal, barely budges. It's like trying to move a small boulder. The head cook barks a command and you all try again, putting your entire body weight into it. Slowly, with a deep groan of protesting metal, the cauldron begins to tilt. The stew, a thick, bubbling mass of meat and vegetables, sloshes dangerously close to the rim. The heat is now unbearable. The steam from the stew billows up, scalding and smelling richly of lamb and cumin. Your eyes water. Sweat streams into your eyes, and your muscles scream in protest. You are locked in a struggle with this metal beast, a battle of leverage and raw strength. This is a universe away from delicately shelling almonds. There is no room for artistry here, only brute force and a terrifying margin for error. If you slip, if your grip fails, you could be horribly burned or worse. The floor around the hearths is dark and permanently stained, a testament, you suspect, to past spills. Finally, the stew begins to pour in a thick, steaming torrent into a waiting pot below. The cook on the other side orchestrates the pour with shouted commands, controlling the angle with incredible skill. Your only job is to hold on, to be a counterweight, to not give way. It feels like an eternity, but the whole process probably takes less than a minute. When the cauldron is empty, you lower it back into its cradle with a deafening sound of metal on stone. You let go of the handle, your hands trembling, your arms feeling like jelly. Your tunic is soaked with sweat. You have just helped serve lunch to a few hundred people. This process will be repeated dozens of times throughout the day. It's a stunning display of human labor, a reminder of what it took to cook on a mass scale before the age of industrial machinery. Historians note that these very cauldrons, especially those used for the janissaries, held immense symbolic power. They were called cauldrons of birth and were revered. If the janissaries overturned their cauldrons, it was the ultimate act of rebellion, a declaration of revolt, the equivalent of a modern army burning its flag. You are given a moment to catch your breath, and you watch as the full pots of stew are hauled away on carts, destined for the various barracks and mess halls. There's no Yelp review for this stew, no one sending it back because it's too salty. It is fuel, pure and simple, for the military and administrative machine of the empire. And yet, there is a pride in the men who cook it. They are not just slopping gruel into a trough. They are upholding their part of a covenant. The Sultan provides for his soldiers, and they, in turn, provide him with their loyalty and strength. As you stand there, catching your breath in the sweltering heat, you realize this is the true face of the palace kitchen. It's not the delicate art of the Halva House or the paranoid perfection of the Cushing. It is this: overwhelming heat, back-breaking labor, and the relentless daily challenge of turning a river of raw ingredients into sustenance for thousands. It is a place of constant danger and discomfort, but also of a strange, powerful community, forged in fire and steam. You have survived your trial by cauldron. The afternoon wears on, a long, grueling stretch of hours marked by heat and labor. After the trial of the great cauldrons, you are not sent back to the relative calm of the Halva House. You are now part of the main kitchen's machinery, a transferable cog moved to wherever an extra pair of hands is needed. You chop vegetables until a blister forms on your thumb. You scrub giant baking trays crusted with burnt-on residue. You haul buckets of water from the courtyard cistern, your arms and shoulders burning with a deep, constant ache. This is the unceasing rhythm of the kitchen. Prepare, cook, serve, and clean, only to begin the cycle again for the next meal. As the main meal of the day, the evening dinner is fully served and dispatched from the kitchens. A new and fascinating process begins. You might assume that any food left in the giant cauldrons or on the serving platters would simply be discarded. But here, nothing is truly wasted. You witness the highly organized and politically charged economy of leftovers. A team of stewards with their ever-present ledgers presides over the distribution. The highest quality leftovers, dishes that were perhaps prepared for the Imperial Council but were not fully consumed, are the first to be allocated. These are carefully portioned out and sent to the households of high-ranking palace officials. It is a perk of their position, a sign of their status. Receiving a tray of choice leftovers from the palace was a mark of favor. Next comes the food from the main kitchens, the vast quantities of stew, pilaf, and bread that were prepared for the general palace population. Large, clean containers are brought in, and the remaining food is ladled into them. You are tasked with helping to carry these containers out of the kitchen and back into the second courtyard. Here, a crowd has gathered. It is a delegation of janissaries, the elite infantry corps who are both the Sultan's protectors and a constant, simmering political threat. The distribution of food to the janissaries is a daily ritual thick with meaning. The quality and quantity of the food they received was a direct measure of the Sultan's regard and the state's prosperity. If the stew was thin and watery, or the portions meager, it was taken as an insult. The stewards oversee the process with a formal, almost solemn air. The janissaries receive their portion, inspect it, and carry it back to their barracks. Their acceptance is a renewal of the daily contract between soldier and state. You watch the transaction, feeling the weight of the political symbolism in a simple ladle of stew. But the chain of distribution does not end there. Once the palace residents and the janissaries have received their share, there is still more. These are the true scraps, the less desirable cuts of meat, the slightly stale bread, the vegetable ends. These are gathered and packed into baskets. A different crowd is waiting at the palace gates, the city's poor and the workers from the dervish lodges and charitable soup kitchens. The palace, in its role as the benevolent heart of the empire, provided for the needy. This daily handout was a crucial form of social welfare and a powerful tool for maintaining public order and loyalty. A well-fed populace was less likely to riot. It's a system of remarkable efficiency, born from a world where true waste was a sin. There is no concept of throwing things away just because they are a day old. Every calorie has a purpose, a destination in the complex social hierarchy that radiates outward from the Sultan. Scholars who study Ottoman society often point to this system of food distribution as a key element of the state's power, a form of gastropolitics, where control over food ensured social and political stability. As you help carry the baskets for the poor to the gates, you see the faces of the people waiting. They are old and young, men and women, their expressions a mixture of hope and resignation. The guards at the gate maintain a strict order as the food is handed out. For these people, this daily gift from the Sultan's kitchen might be the only substantial meal they have. It's a humbling sight. Just hours ago, you were tasting the scent of spices worth more than gold. meant for the most powerful man on Earth. Now, you are handling the very last link in that same food chain, the humble scraps that fuel the lives of the most powerless. You realize that the kitchen you work in is not just feeding a palace, it is feeding an entire social order. From the exquisite single portion for the Sultan to the leftover bread for a beggar at the gate, the food flows through the veins of the city, reinforcing status, buying loyalty, and sustaining life. It's a far cry from the modern concept of leftovers as something you forget in the back of the refrigerator. Here, leftovers are a vital, intentional part of the economic and political landscape. Returning to the now slightly quieter kitchen, you feel a profound sense of the building's role. It is a heart pumping sustenance through a vast and complex body. The work is brutal, the conditions are harsh, but it serves a purpose that extends far beyond the palace walls. It connects the highest to the lowest, the Sultan to his subjects, through the most fundamental of human needs. The resilience on display is not just in the cooks who endure the heat, but in the system itself, an intricate, centuries-old web of distribution that ensures every last grain of rice serves the order of the empire. As the evening deepens, the flurry of serving and distributing food subsides, but the work in the kitchen does not stop. The energy shifts from the frantic pace of cooking to the grueling, endless task of preparation for the next day. But before that, the fires must be tended. This is a task that never, ever ends. The fires in the main hearths of the palace kitchens are never intentionally extinguished. They are banked at night, reduced to glowing embers, but they are kept alive, ready to be stoked back to a roaring blaze before the sun even thinks of rising. You are assigned to a team responsible for managing the fuel. This means leaving the main kitchen complex and heading to the massive wood piles located in a dedicated yard nearby. The air outside is cooler now, a welcome relief from the sweltering heat of the kitchens. But your body is so accustomed to the high temperature that the night air feels shockingly cold. Under the light of a few torches, you join a line of boys and men hauling wood. It's not just any wood. The palace kitchens consumed entire forests. Procurement records show enormous quantities of firewood being delivered to the palace on a regular basis. The work is heavy and dirty. You carry armloads of split logs, your clothes snagging on the rough bark, splinters digging into your hands. The wood is carried into the kitchens and stacked in enormous alcoves near the hearths, ready for the morning. The men who manage the fires, the fire stokers, are a special breed. They are blackened with soot, their faces smudged with ash, their eyes accustomed to the dim, smoky light. They move with a deep understanding of their craft, knowing exactly how to build a fire for intense, quick heat for frying, or a lower, slower fire for simmering a stew for hours. The heat from the hearths, even in their banked state, is a constant presence. It defines this environment. The entire building is a giant heat sink, the stone walls and floors having absorbed the thermal energy of the day's cooking. Even at midnight, the kitchen is warmer than any other part of the palace. This constant, oppressive heat, combined with the smoke, created a working environment that was incredibly dangerous. There's no modern ventilation system, no fire suppression sprinklers. The high, conical chimneys are the only escape for the smoke, and on a day with no wind, the kitchens would become a choking, hazy inferno. The risk of fire was the single greatest threat to the palace. A catastrophic fire in the 15th century destroyed the original kitchens and parts of the harem, leading to the construction of the current, more fire-resistant complex you now work in. Architect Sinan's design, with its multiple domes and stone construction, was as much about fire safety as it was about space. The domes were designed to contain a blaze, preventing it from spreading to adjacent sections. The separation of the kitchens from the main residential areas of the palace was a deliberate, life-saving design choice. As you stack the wood, you can't help but notice the toll this environment takes on the people who work here. The older cooks have persistent coughs. Their eyes are red-rimmed and watery. Burns are a common injury, and the men display their scars, from minor splatters of hot oil to more serious marks from touching a hot surface, with a kind of stoic pride. They are marks of experience, a physical record of their time served in this trial by fire. There is no health and safety officer here, no workers' compensation. You work until you can't. Historians can only speculate on the long-term health effects on the kitchen staff, but it is easy to imagine that respiratory illnesses and other chronic conditions were rampant. Yet, day after day, they returned. Their resilience is staggering. They developed techniques to cope. You see cooks tying damp cloths over their faces to filter the worst of the smoke, a rudimentary form of a respirator. They learned to communicate with hand signals over the roar of the flames and the bubbling of the pots. They built a community in this harsh environment, a brotherhood forged in the shared hardship of the heat and smoke. Your wood hauling task is finished, and you are given a moment of rest, sitting on a low stone bench in a slightly cooler corridor. You watch as the fire stokers carefully bank the embers for the night, covering them with a layer of ash. The great roaring beasts are being put to sleep, their fiery breath reduced to a gentle, orange glow. The kitchen seems to sigh, the intense energy of the day finally beginning to recede. The noise level drops to a low murmur as the cleaning and preparatory tasks for the morning continue at a less frantic pace. You feel a profound exhaustion, a weariness that has settled deep into your bones. It's not just the physical labor, it's the relentless sensory overload. The heat, the smoke, the noise, the constant pressure. You think about the simple comfort of a cool, quiet room, a luxury that seems impossibly distant right now. The fires may be banked, but their presence is still felt in every stone of the building. They are the heart of the kitchen, and their rhythm dictates the lives of everyone within these walls. As you sit there, gathering your strength for the next task, you understand that surviving here isn't just about learning to cook. It's about learning to endure the fire. The night deepens, and the kitchen settles into its final phase of work. The great fires are banked, casting a low, hellish glow across the cavernous halls. The primary cooking is done, but now begins the monumental task of preparation for the dawn, and with it, a confrontation with the day's accumulated filth. Your next assignment is cleaning, and it is here that you get an unvarnished look at the palace's approach to hygiene and health. You are handed a rough brush, and pointed towards a row of massive wooden chopping blocks. They are slick with the residue of the day's work, meat juices, vegetable pulp, and fish scales. Your job is to scrub them clean. There is no hot running water from a tap. Instead, you use cold water hauled in buckets from the cistern, mixed with coarse sand and ash from the hearths, which act as an abrasive and a primitive disinfectant. As you scrub, the grime comes away in a foul-smelling slurry. It's hard, messy work, and the smell of raw meat and old fish clings to you. You look around and see this process being repeated everywhere. Boys are on their hands and knees, scrubbing the stone floors, which are slick with a day's worth of grease and spilled food. Others are scouring the inside of pots, not the gleaming copper of the cushing, but the workhorse cauldrons of the main kitchen, their interiors blackened and stained. The entire concept of sanitation is profoundly different from what you know. There is no understanding of germ theory. The goal of cleaning is not to sterilize, but to remove visible dirt. The standard is looks clean and doesn't smell too bad. Water is a precious commodity. While the palace had a sophisticated system of aqueducts and cisterns, the sheer volume of water needed for a modern, sterile kitchen was unimaginable. Drains exist in the floor, but they are simple channels cut into the stone, and you can only imagine what pests they might attract. You see a rat scurry along the edge of the wall, disappearing into a dark corner, and no one bats an eye. Rodents and insects are just a part of the landscape, an accepted nuisance. It's a slightly horrifying realization. The food for an emperor is being prepared in an environment that would be instantly shut down by any modern health inspector. Yet, despite this, there was a keen awareness of another, more immediate health threat: poison. The fear of deliberate contamination was omnipresent. This is where the palace physicians came in. They were not just concerned with the Sultan's health, but also had a role in overseeing the kitchen. A head physician was a powerful figure in the palace, and his staff would have regularly inspected the food supplies. Their concern, however, was less about bacteria and more about purity and poison. They would inspect the meat to ensure it was from a healthy animal, check the flour for ergot, a toxic fungus that can grow on rye, and most importantly, they worked with the food tasters to ensure the Sultan's safety. A fascinating, if perhaps apocryphal, belief was that a special type of porcelain, celadon ware, would change color if it came into contact with poison. The palace had a vast collection of these plates, used not just for their beauty but as a supposed line of defense. Historians now know this is a myth, but the belief itself speaks volumes about the level of paranoia. So while the general hygiene was, by modern standards, appalling, the specific security around the food for the elite was intense. It's a strange contradiction. A cook might not wash his hands after touching raw meat, but he would be executed if a suspicious substance was found in his station. The focus was on malicious intent, not microscopic threats. It was a system built to combat human enemies, not invisible ones. Your task of scrubbing the chopping blocks is complete. They are visibly cleaner, but you know that if you had a microscope, you would be horrified. You are now part of the final cleanup crew, swishing water across the stone floors, pushing the day's detritus towards the drains. The air begins to clear a little as the last of the smoke from the banked fires finds its way up the chimneys. The kitchen is as clean as it is ever going to be. The human cost of these conditions is impossible to quantify but easy to imagine. Foodborne illness must have been a constant risk, though it would have been attributed to bad humors or imbalance in the body rather than bacteria. The resilience of the people who ate this food, and especially those who worked here, is a testament to the strength of the human immune system. They lived in a world teeming with pathogens that we are now insulated from, and their bodies were simply tougher as a result. As the cleaning winds down, a sense of finality settles over the kitchen. The tools are put away, the surfaces are wiped down, and the great halls fall into a relative quiet for the first time in nearly 20 hours. It is a quiet filled with the ghosts of the day's labor. You can still smell the smoke, the spices, the meat. You can almost hear the echo of the chopping, the shouting, the clang of metal. The kitchen is at rest, but it feels like a sleeping giant, its breath still warm. You have survived the day, and you have helped to clean up the mess. It's a grimy, thankless, and deeply unsettling part of the job, but it's the final act before the curtain falls on a long and brutal day. With the bulk of the cleaning done and the kitchen sinking into a state of temporary slumber, you are granted a brief respite before the cycle begins anew. But your education is not over. An older cook, a man with a perpetually flour-dusted apron and kind eyes, takes you and a few other new apprentices aside. His name is Yusuf, and unlike the other senior staff, he occasionally speaks in complete sentences. He has been tasked with giving you your first formal lesson in the most important staple of the Ottoman table, the pilaf. You might think of pilaf as a simple side dish, just rice cooked in broth. But here, in this palace, pilaf is an art form, a science, and a cornerstone of every single meal. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of variations. Plain pilaf, known as Said pilaf, was the most common, but there were also pilafs with chickpeas, with currants and pine nuts, with tiny pieces of lamb with eggplant or flavored with saffron. A cook's skill was often judged by his ability to make a perfect pilaf. It was the ultimate test. Yusuf leads you not to the giant cauldrons, but to a smaller hearth, a station dedicated to this specific craft. He explains that making pilaf for thousands is a different skill, one of brute force and estimation. What he will teach you is the inner pilaf, the style of dish that would be served to the officials or as part of a more refined meal. The principles, however, are the same. The lesson begins not with the cooking, but with the rice itself. He shows you how to inspect the grains, to look for imperfections, for broken pieces, for discoloration. The palace used long grain rice, and only the most perfect grains were acceptable. Next, he demonstrates how to wash the rice. This is not a quick rinse. The rice is soaked in salted, warm water for an hour, then rinsed repeatedly until the water runs completely clear. This, he explains, is the most crucial step. It removes the surface starch, which is the enemy of a perfect pilaf. Failure to do this results in a sticky, gummy mess, a cardinal sin for a palace cook. As you meticulously wash a bowl of rice under his watchful eye, he talks about the fat. Pilaf is not cooked in water alone. It is first sautéed in fat to toast the grains and coat them, ensuring each one remains separate after cooking. The preferred fat is clarified butter, or ghee, which has a high smoke point and a rich, nutty flavor. He shows you how to render the butter, slowly melting it until the milk's solid separate and can be skimmed off. The pure, golden liquid that remains is the essence of a good pilaf. Then comes the cooking. The washed and dried rice is added to the hot butter and stirred gently but constantly. You must be patient, Yusuf says, his voice low and raspy. You are not just heating the rice, you are convincing each grain to become a jewel. He makes you listen for the sound it makes, a soft, whispering rustle. He shows you how the grains turn translucent at the edges. This is the sign that they are ready for the liquid. The liquid is a rich, clear broth, usually chicken or lamb, which has been simmering for hours. The ratio of liquid to rice is a carefully guarded secret, different for each type of rice and each cook. Yusuf measures it not with a cup but by eye, a skill born from making this dish thousands of times. The broth is added all at once, and it erupts in a cloud of steam. The pot is immediately covered with a tight-fitting lid. And now, he says, we do not touch it. This is the hardest part for an impatient apprentice. You are not allowed to lift the lid to peek. You must trust the process. The heat is lowered to the barest minimum, and the rice is left to absorb the broth in its own time. To demonstrate the importance of this, Yusuf tells a story of an apprentice who lifted the lid too soon, ruining a pilaf meant for a visiting dignitary. The boy was not beaten or dismissed, but was forced to eat his own sticky, ruined pilaf for 3 days straight, a far more humiliating punishment. It's a classic example of the kitchen's often ironic and psychological approach to discipline. While the pilaf steams, Yusuf explains its cultural significance. Plain pilaf was the bedrock of the meal, served with everything. It was the bread of the palace. But elaborate pilafs, studded with nuts, fruits, and meat, were centerpieces, dishes designed to display wealth and generosity. A quirky fact that scholars of food history love is that the dane, or individual grain, was a point of obsession. The ideal pilaf was one where every single grain was separate, fluffy, and perfectly cooked, not too hard, not too soft. The cooks would refer to this as tell-tell, or string by string. Finally, Yusuf deems the pilaf is ready. He removes the pot from the heat and places a clean cloth between the pot and the lid to absorb the excess steam. It is left to rest for another 10 minutes. Then, with a flourish, he removes the lid. The aroma is heavenly, the nutty scent of the butter, the savory richness of the broth, the simple perfection of the rice. He takes a large fork and gently fluffs the grains. They cascade from the fork, each one distinct, a perfect, fluffy jewel just as he promised. He gives each of you a small portion to taste. It is simple, yet sublime. The texture is perfect, the flavor deep and satisfying. You have eaten rice your whole life, but you have never tasted anything like this. In this single, humble dish, you understand the philosophy of the entire kitchen. Take a simple ingredient, apply meticulous technique and unwavering patience, and elevate it to a form of art. Your first lesson is over. You now know the theory of a perfect pilaf, but you also know that it will take you years, perhaps a lifetime, to master it yourself. Your lesson on the art of the pilaf is a brief, almost scholarly interlude in a day defined by relentless physical exertion. The taste of the perfect rice still lingers in your mouth, a reminder of the standards you are now expected to strive for. But there is little time for reflection. The rhythm of the palace is gearing up for another event, a luncheon for the Divan, the Imperial Council. This is not a meal for thousands, but it is, in some ways, an even more high-pressure event. The men being served are the most powerful in the empire after the Sultan himself, the Grand Vizier, other viziers, military chiefs, and high-ranking judges. The energy in the kitchen shifts again. The focus narrows to one of the specific domed kitchens, the one designated for preparing food for the Divan. While not as obsessively secure as the Sultan's private cushing, the standards here are incredibly high. A special team of cooks, men with more experience and a higher rank than the general staff, takes charge. You and the other apprentices are roped in, but only for the most menial support tasks. Fetching ingredients, washing the endless stream of prep bowls, and staying out of the way. You are effectively a runner, a human shopping cart for the master chefs. A cook will shout onions, and you must scurry to the storeroom and return with a basket of them, already peeled by another low-ranking boy. Parsley is the next call, and you must deliver a fresh, washed bunch. The pace is frantic, the commands sharp and without pleasantries. There is no time for please or thank you. It is a machine in motion, and you are one of its smallest, fastest moving parts. The dishes being prepared are more complex and refined than the hearty stews of the main kitchen. You see lamb being roasted with quinces and apricots, a classic combination of sweet and savory. There are elaborate vegetable dishes, stuffed eggplants and peppers, and multiple types of savory pastries, or burek. And of course, there is pilaf. Not just one kind, but several, including a rich pilaf with chicken and chickpeas. The number and variety of dishes served were a direct reflection of the importance of the guests. A Divan luncheon was a culinary spectacle, a reaffirmation of the empire's wealth and the Sultan's generosity. The pressure is immense because every dish will be seen and judged. The viziers were often connoisseurs of food, men from wealthy, sophisticated households who had their own skilled cooks. To serve them, a substandard meal would be a deep embarrassment for the palace kitchen staff. More than that, it could be interpreted as a slight. In the intricate, non-verbal language of the court, a poorly cooked dish could send an unintended political message. You catch a glimpse of the head cook for this kitchen, inspecting a tray of burek before it goes into the oven. He notices one piece is slightly misshapen. He plucks it from the tray and tosses it aside without a second thought. Perfection is the only acceptable standard. There is no room for a rustic or homemade look. This is food as a statement of power, and it must be flawless. Once the food is cooked, the plating process begins. It is another art form. Large, ornate serving platters are brought out. The food is arranged with an eye for color, texture, and symmetry. The roasts are garnished with fresh herbs. The pilafs are molded into perfect domes. Everything is designed to impress. You watch, mesmerized, as a cook carefully arranges slices of roasted lamb on a bed of rice, creating a beautiful, edible mosaic. Then comes the procession. The meal is not sent up on a dumbwaiter. A line of servers, specially dressed for the occasion, assembles. Each one is handed a heavy, laden platter. They form a human conveyor belt, moving with practiced speed and grace from the kitchen, across the second courtyard, to the divan hall where the council meets. You watch them go, a silent, efficient parade of culinary diplomacy. A fascinating piece of historical trivia is that the council members ate in silence, and very quickly. The meal was a formal, almost ceremonial part of the proceedings, not a leisurely social affair. With the food gone, a temporary, deceptive calm falls over the kitchen. The cooks wipe their brows, their tension visibly easing. But it doesn't last. For you, the work is just beginning. You are now faced with a mountain of greasy, food-encrusted pots, pans, and trays. The aftermath of a feast is always more work for those at the bottom. As you scrub a large, heavy roasting pan, the reality of the situation settles in. You have just witnessed the creation of a meal for the empire's ruling class. You have touched the ingredients, felt the heat of the ovens, and seen the artistry of the chefs. But you will not taste that food. You are on the other side of a vast, unbridgeable divide. Your role is to facilitate the luxury, not to partake in it. It's a lesson in class structure at its most fundamental. The resilience here is in the ability to find pride in your small role, to see yourself as part of this grand, important spectacle, even if you are just the stagehand hidden in the wings, scrubbing the props after the play is over. It's a strange, bittersweet feeling, a mixture of proximity to power and the stark reality of your own humble place in the world. The divan luncheon is over. The great men of the empire have been fed, and the main evening meal for the thousands of palace residents has been served. A deep, weary quiet, the likes of which you have not experienced since before dawn, begins to settle over the vast kitchen complex. The roaring fires have been banked into glowing embers, and the frantic energy of cooking has been replaced by the slow, methodical rhythm of the final, and most daunting, cleanup. You thought the cleaning you did earlier was intense. This is another level entirely. This is the Great Reset, the process of returning the entire food factory to a state of readiness for the next day's onslaught. The scale of the task is monumental. Every surface, every pot, every utensil used by 1,000-person staff to feed thousands more must be washed. You are part of a team assigned to the floors. Armed with a crude broom made of bound twigs, you sweep the stone flags. The debris of the day is a kind of archaeological record of the meals prepared. Onion skins, fish scales, stray grains of rice, vegetable peelings, and a fine layer of soot and ash that covers everything. You sweep it all into piles, which are then shoveled into baskets and hauled away. There is no dustpan. You use a flat piece of wood to scoop the final remnants into the basket. Next comes the washing. You and other boys haul endless buckets of water. The floor is doused, and then you get on your hands and knees with rough brushes and scrub. The water quickly turns into a gray, greasy soup. It's cold, dirty work, and your knees ache from kneeling on the hard stone. The water is then pushed towards the central drainage channels with large wooden squeegees. The air grows thick with the damp, earthy smell of the wet stone and the day's lingering food odors. The sheer physical exhaustion is immense. You have been awake and working for at least 16 hours. Your body is a symphony of aches and pains. Your back protests from hauling wood and water. Your hands are raw from scrubbing and chopping. Your thumb throbs where a blister has formed and broken, and your lungs feel scratchy from a day of breathing smoke. You look at the faces of the other apprentices around you. They are masks of fatigue, their movements slow and heavy. Yet they continue. There is no option to stop. The job is not done until it is done. You see the older, more experienced cooks undertaking their own rituals of cleanup. They carefully clean and oil their personal knives, wrapping them in cloth. They scour the copper pots they are responsible for, not with the same furious energy as you, but with a practiced, efficient motion, their pride as craftsmen extending to the care of their tools. Their resilience is of a different kind, not just the physical endurance of a long day, but the professional discipline to finish their work properly, no matter how tired they are. The historical reality of this moment is something rarely depicted. We see the feasts, the processions, the beautiful dishes. We rarely consider the mountain of filth and labor that such consumption produces. There's no magical cleanup crew. It is done by hand, by the lowest-ranking members of the kitchen staff, in the dead of night. It is a world away from the convenience of a modern dishwasher or a garbage disposal. The simple act of washing a single giant cauldron is a multi-person, hour-long task involving scraping, scouring with sand, and repeated rinsing. As you finish your section of the floor, a steward inspects your work, running a finger over the wet stone. He grunts, a sound that you have come to understand as grudging approval, and gestures for you to move on to the next task, cleaning the grease traps near the drains. It's the worst job yet, a foul-smelling task that makes you gag, but you do it without complaint. To complain would be to show weakness, to mark yourself as someone not suited for this life. Survival here is as much about mental fortitude as it is about physical strength. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the work is done. The kitchens are as clean and orderly as they will ever be. The tools are in their places, the wood is stacked, the floors are damp but clear of debris. The sleeping giant is truly at rest. The air is still and heavy, and the only light comes from a few strategically placed oil lamps that cast long, dancing shadows through the cavernous, empty halls. The silence is profound, broken only by the drip of water from a wet bench or the distant footsteps of a guard on his rounds. A steward gives a final, sharp nod. You are dismissed. Your workday, which began in the darkness before dawn, is finally ending in the deep of night. You have survived. You have endured the heat, the smoke, the chaos, the pressure, and the sheer, mind-numbing labor. You have played your small part in feeding an empire, from its powerful viziers to the poor at its gates. And now, you face the greatest reward the palace can offer you, a few precious hours of rest. You stumble out of the silent kitchen complex, your body moving on autopilot. The night air of the second courtyard is a shocking, welcome cold. It feels clean in your lungs after a day of breathing smoke and steam. The sky above is a canopy of brilliant, sharp stars, a sight you were too tired and busy to notice on your arrival so many hours ago. The palace is asleep. The grand halls are dark, The bustling courtyard is empty, and the only sounds are the chirping of crickets and the distant murmur of the sea. You follow a small group of other apprentices, your footsteps shuffling on the stone path. Your destination is not a comfortable private room. It is a long, dormitory-style barracks located near the kitchens, a building specifically for the lower-ranking kitchen staff. You enter a vast, dimly lit hall filled with dozens of simple sleeping pallets on the floor. Some are already occupied by sleeping forms, bundles of blankets rising and falling with the slow rhythm of exhausted breathing. The air inside is close, smelling of unwashed bodies, wool blankets, and the faint, lingering scent of the day's cooking that clings to everyone's clothes and hair. There is no privacy here. Your pallet is simply a thin mattress stuffed with straw laid directly on the floor, with a single, coarse wool blanket. It's not much, but after the day you've had, it looks as inviting as the most luxurious bed in the world. You don't even bother to undress. You simply collapse onto the pallet, the straw rustling beneath you. The coarse wool of the blanket is scratchy against your skin, but the warmth it offers is a profound comfort. Lying there in the dim light, surrounded by the soft sounds of your fellow workers sleeping, you finally have a moment to think. Your mind replays the day in a dizzying series of flashes. The intimidating grandeur of the Imperial Gate in the pre-dawn gloom, the overwhelming sweetness of the Halva House, the terrifying heat of the great cauldrons, the focused intensity of Yusuf teaching you the secrets of pilaf, the mountain of greasy pots and pans. It feels less like a single day and more like a lifetime of experience compressed into one grueling cycle of the sun. You think about the strange pride you felt, the brief moment of trust when you carried the cookies towards the Sultan's kitchen, the small promotion from shelling almonds to stirring jam, the shared struggle with the other boys as you tilted the massive cauldron. These were not grand achievements, but in the context of this rigid and unforgiving world, they felt like victories. You were tested at every turn and you did not fail. You were not sent away in disgrace. You survived. This is the ultimate human resilience of the palace kitchen. It's not just about enduring the physical hardship. It's about finding meaning and dignity in the relentless labor. It's the master's pride in his craft, the steward's pride in his perfect ledger, and the apprentice's pride in simply making it to the end of the day. They were not just cogs in a machine. They were individuals who, through skill and endurance, carved out their place in a formidable world. They built a community with its own rules, language, and loyalties in the fiery heart of the empire. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come immediately. Your muscles still twitch with the memory of the day's work. The phantom smells of smoke and sugar and roasted lamb drift through your mind. You think about the food you helped create, dishes that celebrated a victory, sealed a political alliance, or simply sustained a soldier for another day. You were a part of that. Your aching hands, your tired back, they were the price of admission to this extraordinary, brutal, and vital world. As your exhaustion finally begins to outweigh the day's stimulation, you realize you have learned the most important lesson of the palace kitchen. It is a place of endless, cyclical work. The sun will rise in a few short hours and it will all begin again. The fires will be stoked, the deliveries will arrive, the The chopping and stirring and cleaning will recommence. But for now, there is this brief, precious pocket of darkness and silence. This shared, exhausted peace in the humble dormitory. You pull the scratchy blanket up to your chin, and as the last vestiges of consciousness fade, you feel a strange sense of belonging. You are a palace cook, and tomorrow you will do it all again. The world of the Topkapi Palace kitchens, with its fiery hearths and rigid hierarchies, feels like a distant, almost alien landscape. Yet the echoes of that world resonate in our own. The immense pressure, the demand for perfection, the pride in a craft well mastered. These are timeless human experiences, as real for a palace cook in the 16th century as they are for a top chef or any dedicated professional today. Their story reminds us that behind every grand spectacle of history, behind every emperor's feast, there is a hidden world of immense labor, a world of ordinary people performing extraordinary feats of endurance every single day. As you settle deeper into your own comfort, into the quiet of your own space, take a moment to appreciate the simple luxuries they could only dream of. The ease of turning on a light, the miracle of clean, hot water from a tap, the simple safety of a smoke-free room. We stand on a mountain of progress built by the silent, often unacknowledged labor of generations past. Their struggles, their resilience, and their ability to create moments of beauty and order amidst the chaos laid the groundwork for the world we inhabit. Let the story of their long day fade now. Let the sounds of the kitchen, the chopping, the fire, the shouting, dissolve into the quiet of your room. The great cauldrons are cooling, the fires are banked to embers, and the palace sleeps under a blanket of stars. Allow yourself to drift along with that peace. There is no more work to be done. There are no more pots to scrub. There is only rest. Let the echoes of the past whisper you to sleep into a quiet and well-deserved dream.